as cinematographers, we're constantly in high-pressure situations, and we have to take responsibility for equipment choices. We have to fix the problems when they arise, So I'm very suspicious of this particular tool, and I was pleasantly surprised, much more so than I expected. And not to say that I wasn't expecting to be, actually, because DJI has consistently impressed me. The Ronin in particular, and the Inspire 2. The track record for success is so high. But this particular thing, this camera, being that it's a standalone camera and it's not a gimbal and it's not a drone, felt like such a departure from the product line that I was a little bit suspicious. And in the end, I could not be more impressed. ProRes RAW is, it's totally new, for me anyway. I just started, that's a completely new format for me. We opened it in Baselight, which opens it natively. It seemed to have plenty of dynamic range. It was sharp. Didn't see any aliasing issues. We didn't see any banding or breakup. It's clearly got plenty of bit depth and dynamic range. And we were looking at it in HDR, actually. So we looked at it in Dolby PQ, in DCI-P3, and it looked fabulous. It was on par with anything else, for sure. I was really interested to see how it would handle the sodium vapor and the mercury vapor stuff we had shot downtown. Those are always tricky colors to work with, especially these kind of narrow band, narrow spectrum lights. And skin tone, and how much room we have in the skin tones to move it around. You never expect it to be able to correct anything back to a normal full spectrum skin tone. But I was curious to see how much I could manipulate the color. Taking the sodium vapor from canary yellow up to orange, and how we could move that around and where the image would start to break, because it always does, on every camera. And the camera had more color than I expected. There was no shortage of color, which is refreshing, because in many situations you end up with kind of pastel-y looks or desaturated looks in those kinds of situations, because the camera can't render all the colors accurately, and it seemed to do. It was extremely good. That's the other thing. The highlight retention is spectacular. We did some shots where on the beach, looking straight out to the sea with the setting sun, and it's reflecting in the water, and in the DI it really held up. You would normally expect that to start to look a little bit digital and clip around the edges and look kind of hard, and it didn't. It rolled off in a really soft and smooth way, which I was surprised about. I think lens choice is a huge part of the cinematographer's toolkit, and how we help the director tell stories, and lenses have an enormous effect on the way the image looks, and also the resources that are required to shoot scenes in many cases. For example, we were shooting in a downtown location that was relatively low light. Both didn't have a lot of resources in terms of lighting, but also didn't want to use a lot, because I wanted to push the camera a little bit. And but I knew that I would probably still need to shoot close to wide open in some situations, and I wanted a set of lenses that would let me shoot at a 1.4 or 1.7 or what have you. And so we went with the Leicas, but those lenses also have a spectacular quality to them, especially in terms of the bokeh and the softness. So it was exciting to give that a try, But having the freedom to make that choice to support both the resources of the project we were doing and also the aesthetics that Will and I were going for was important, and the fact that the camera supported that opportunity was great. I didn't have to do very much operating with that at all if I set the camera up to follow my hand movements, and I could operate it much more like a handheld camera and use the stabilization in the gimbal to absorb those movements and still allow me to operate the camera. So, for example, in the short that Will and I did, there's a shot looking down the staircase as the actress comes up the stairs, and we kind of just lift the camera up and pan with her. It'd be a very difficult handheld shot to do with any other system, And I tried it with the thumb wheel, and it was near impossible. And once we just kind of locked the camera and I just held it over the edge and pulled it up, it worked great. And I found that the ZAxis is a really interesting concept that had never crossed my mind as being something that would work, but it works great. It's we're so used to doing passive Z-axis stabilization, like with a Flow Cine black arm or with a vibration isolator, or you know, even an armed car, you know, we're absorbing all this with springs and dampeners, but to have it active and electronic was super interesting. And especially being able to set the camera up to say, okay, I want the camera to stay here regardless of what I do. Or I want it to dampen my move. You know, I'm gonna boom the camera here and I want the camera to help me with that, help me keep that smooth. And learning when to apply those settings was a new experience for me. But the result is fantastic, you know. In my work, I really think of focus as a critical storytelling tool. You know, it's really important as a method to tell the audience where to look, and it's a director's tool. So I love that DJI thought to make a focus unit that an assistant could use as a storytelling tool, not just about focus, but you know, something that actually functions like a piece of equipment we're used to using. But the fact that the autofocus works is great. And the fact that you can control and adjust the autofocus from the assistant's handset is really cool. You know, maybe you're doing a really fast run-up, or a tight insert, or you're shooting a 6-year-old. You know, those things come in incredibly handy. Wow, the video transmission's amazing. I've never seen anything like it. I want to take it off the camera and put it on all our other cameras. You know, it's so cool. It's so impressive. Being able to roll the camera remotely, which of course we can do with other systems, but in an integrated way, is fantastic. You know, we're not bolting aftermarket stuff on the camera. There aren't a bunch of cables and brackets that are required. It's all self-contained. So being able to change NDs, roll the camera, set ISO, set color temperature, and ride color temperature in between takes is a must at this point. I mean, I'm so spoiled now. It's like, oh, I can just, in between takes, you know, switch an ND quickly and drop the color temperature 200 degrees and we're going again like that. And I wish all cameras did that. Every manufacturer these days, they're making, you know, they make a box that you put a lens on. You know, and that's what it is. And everyone has a variation of their box with the lens, and that's perfectly great. I saw this thing and I was so excited because it's at least in terms of what I'm used to, completely out of the box thinking in terms of how what we associate a camera as being, you know, because it takes the box with the lens on it idea and expands on it in this really interesting way. This tool takes all the things that I like a stable, you know, level horizon, elegant camera movement, and puts it into a very mobile package, and that's super fun. I like the freedom that handheld operating gives me as a filmmaker. I like the idea that I can, especially in a scene where the actors are very expressive, and it needs to be free and open, and you're not relying on people to hit marks or be super precise, and it's sort of there has to be a fluidity to the storytelling that supports the story, and so in those situations, being handheld is great, I think. The camera doesn't replace the dolly, you know, and I wouldn't expect it to, but it does make the process of moving the camera and the resulting image of moving the camera easier in many ways. And especially if you're used to moving the camera with a gimbal. You know, if you're carrying a traditional camera in a gimbal with a cage, and you have you're wearing a rig that's suspending the gimbal in front of you so you can manage the weight. You know, those things are cumbersome and tedious and heavy, and they affect the shots you can do. So if you want to work in that way, which we often do, myself included, this camera frees you up in an enormous way, I think, and makes it easier, for certain. And it frees up the filmmaker, in many ways can free up the cast, I think, and allow you to experiment a bit. You know, I do believe in that. You know, I think it's really important to work with the actors and work with the director and think about staging and the relationships of the camera and be able to just grab it and, well, what about from over here? And let's look at it from over here. And okay, you know, and during a rehearsal, for example, you know, you're in a traditional filmmaking environment. You know, you might set up a shot with a director's finder, and you get some positions and you work it out with the actor, and no one can see it, and you kind of, you know, you find that shot. and then you commit to it and you lay the track and you do that, and that has its benefits, and I love working that way, and I usually do. This particular tool gives filmmakers an opportunity to do things that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to do with this much ease prior.